Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP. We are just going to jump right on in and continue our aggressive pursuit of Duna by sending even more Kerbals down. I'll explain the process as we go, but basically we're just going to spend the first half of the episode on the build and the latter half on the mission. There's nothing we're going to be doing mission-wise here, but we are going to grab these two contracts to do a manned return from the orbit, as well as a crewed landing and return, both from Duna. So we're going to grab those and work on those, but probably in a future episode. So today, the star of the show is going to be the ERS Exploration Rover System by ASET mod. And it's this kind of like prepackaged modular rover. There's not many options on it. There's basically just a crew cabin and then cargo modules. So it's but it does have one of the best control cockpits. The IVA of it is just absolutely wonderful. So it'd be a shame not to be able to make some use out of it. I did initially want to send the Phileas Fogg out to Duna, but it became too much of a challenge to not only get the thing out there, but it wasn't really designed to fly in a Duna atmosphere. It was designed to fly in Kerbals, and just barely at that. So, unfortunately, the Phileas Fogg will not be seeing the red sands. But we have the ERS, which will be more than capable once we get our wheels on. There we go. I always recommend selecting the ground option when adding these wheels. That's that little orange checkerboard, and so you'll be able to see exactly where the wheel will be lined up. So now I am throwing in a reaction wheel and bearing it inside. It's not exactly centered, but I think it'll be okay. But that will be there to flip us over if we ever find ourselves capsized. So now it is time to just throw on some science. The landers that we brought to Duna surface in the last episode, or in the previous episode before that, none of them had any science on board. We did crew reports, we did surface samples, things like that. But for the most part, we weren't really able to collect any of that. So we are going to make ourselves a science machine that will go around and collect the experiments in various biomes along the way. And then it will all be put together into that science storage unit, collected and then held until a further mission. So we are putting these on two-way symmetry, and then we're going to remove them so that way we'll have two sets of experiments to run at any given location. Here I am putting a rover brain on top, and that is a mistake that I will come to regret later, but I don't notice it, so we'll just move on. I get my cameras placed forward and backwards. This isn't KXP POV, but because of the ERS rover being what it is, I just can't help myself but make it equipped for IVA travel. We are going to put a medium scanning arm. I don't think we have access to the large yet, so medium, it will just have to be good enough. I lucked out. It had a nice clean space on the side that I could hold it. It looks pretty good there. And it'll be close enough and low enough that it should have no problem scanning. And we're going to name this the ERS Rover Duna because this is so far just going to be available to use on Duna. We may end up replicating it or changing around for another planet later, but for now, that's just a simple naming system so that way we don't forget what each thing is in our list. Here I am in the back adding the dome lights and attaching them to the SAS, the RCS, and the brake. So rather than coming on when the lights go on, Those will come when each one of those things are activated, which will give us a quick and easy way of noticing when each of our systems are on. It's very important when you're traveling very fast downhill and there's not a lot of gravity and such. You want to know when your reaction wheel is on, because you'll be controlling in a different way than normal. So I like to have my reaction wheel attached to my RCS, because there's no RCS on this craft. And so having a little dome light in the back that shines blue and lets me know that my reaction wheel is on, or a green light for my SAS, it's very helpful. Highly recommend doing that with your rovers. Anyways, I'm putting in the action groups into the description, so I'll have the labels on the keys, because that is part of the ASET. Really handy. And then for the rest of it, just adding the experiments to the appropriate action group. This camera comes from the Neptune mod, and unfortunately it doesn't actually add any science, but it does allow you an interesting little low-tech camera image at any given moment, so we'll keep it on. It's kind of fun. So I have Action Group 4 performs left science, and then Action Group 5 will collect all the science from the left. Action Group 6 performs all the right side science, and then Action Group 7 collects all the left. And in the collection process, it will also retract the magnetometer boom. I highly recommend adding toggle magnetometer to any of your collection action groups. We're going to throw a big old battery on here that's going to hold about 2,000 charge. That should be plenty in order to run our experiments. And the solar panel that we put on the top is large enough that it should be able to charge quicker than our experiments will be able to run out. So this should have no electrical problems. Communication, on the other hand, may be a little tricky. We don't have a good network setup on Duna right now, so we are probably not going to have connection to the KSC when we try to transmit our science, so we're going to have to keep that in mind and realize that our science grab may be temporary and we may need to send another mission down to the Duna surface to actually pick up the science and return it either to orbit to transmit or just return to Kerbin itself. But getting ahead of myself, this mission first needs to get down to the surface. So I'm putting on some lights here. I do plan on traveling even if it's dark, and so I want to be able to make sure that our Kerbals can see everything in the way. So I have some high beam lights on the top, and then I was hoping that these little spotlights would give me some side coverage, but these lights are actually too small, so wasting a little time here putting them on all the different action groups, but we will replace it with other things later. So time to go ahead and start the simulation, test it out, see how everything looks. And like I mentioned, these lights were just too weak, didn't provide any kind of actual help. So we're going to go with the dome lights. We're going to increase the light range and then replace these along all the sides. I'll see you in a second. Alright, so now it is time to load it up with parachutes. This won't be doing a powered landing. It's going to be parachute descent only, so hopefully 4 of them will be enough. We do want to make sure that they're relatively evenly placed, so that way it doesn't come down with one side being too dramatic over the other. Want to make sure that we land on all 4 wheels if possible. Just looking at some of my battery options. I don't have a lot of storage left in the cargo, so I'm just going to kind of tuck them under here. It doesn't look very good, but regardless, it will work. And I'm going to throw in these tiny little decouplers, side decouplers, and we're going to attach our parachutes to them because I didn't like how it looked with the empty parachute attachment. So we're going to just go ahead and get rid of those for a nice, clean, sleek outer look. So since our last test went off without a hitch, it's time to wrap it all up in a fairing and finalize our rover. So let's go ahead and bring this into the VAB and start working on it vertically. So we are going to need some way of deorbiting this, and it's always best to build your rockets in reverse. So the first thing we're going to work on is how do we get this thing out of Duna orbit and down to the surface safely. And we're going to use the same stage is also going to be the stage that brings us to Duna. I'm going to add a heat shield here. In every test that I've done, we really don't need the heat shield. Like, it's never been a problem overheating, but we're just going to include it for safety's sake. So now I'm going to throw on a little extra fuel, and we're going to see if this stage right here will be enough to bring us from Kerbin orbit down to the surface of Duna, and unfortunately it was not. Not to bring it that whole trip. It was definitely enough to bring us down to the surface of Duna, so we are going to keep that, and we're going to just work on a different kind of interplanetary stage. And by that, I mean a super overpowered launch vehicle. So the strongest engines we have at the moment, well, technically are the twin bore, but those won't fit on the bottom of here very easily. So we're going to just have to use the main sails, which are good. They're pretty powerful. So we're going to use those in a 4-way configuration. And we don't really need these control surfaces, but it will give us a lot more control. So we're going to keep those on. We're going to throw on more mainsail engines for our side boosters and hook up a fuel duct in between and try to make them as aerodynamic as possible. So let's go ahead and add a little more fuel there, and let's test it. But more importantly than the test is the making sure your staging is correct. If you notice here, I'm kind of all out of whack. I need my side boosters and my main boosters to fire at the same time. I've got my nuclear engines all in separate stages as well, so it always pays off to check your staging in the VAB. And we're going to throw on some solar panels here for the interplanetary stage. Make sure that we don't lose electrical power and control on our way down. So let's go ahead and simulate. Everything was good, but it could be a little better. I'm deciding to double up our lower stage lifting engines and turn them into side boosters as well. All 8 mainsails. And we're going to do that again. We're going to go through several iterations of these side boosters. I'm going to kind of stop talking about these side boosters because what you see here still is not what we end up with. But that is the beauty of the crash simulation test flight mod, and that is gives you the ability to try over and over again until you find something that just works the way you want it to. So once again, fuel ducts to, it's not quite asparagus staging when you only have one fuel duct going into it, but once you have this kind of multi-stage setup here where I've got side boosters going into side boosters and then those going into the main thing, that is asparagus staging. If you were to have all 4 feeding into the same one and jettison all at the same time, that would be called onion staging. So there you go. It's time to test. Once again, could be a little better. I did forget to remove the oxidizer from the interplanetary stage, so I was carrying a whole bunch of extra weight that I didn't need to. Once again, we are going to readjust our side boosters, and this time we're going bigger, because sometimes, the answer is more boosters, but often in my experience, a better answer is bigger boosters. So let's go ahead and get all 8 mainsails back in play. And once again, we're going to go for some aerodynamics, but I want to make sure that we utilize that space with some fuel. So we're going to add this little funky shape here. And we're sitting at about 7,900 delta V, which in theory should be enough, but we start running into the rocket equation and we find ourselves needing more and more just to lift the same amount. But nonetheless, we can just asparagus stage these large boosters, and now we have, what would that be, 16 mainsails for our side boosters? Brings us to a 2.75 thrust to weight ratio, which was good. This rocket is starting to perform very well. I am going to need to strut it, make sure it has control, as well as throw in a better reaction wheel, because currently all we've been using is the one on the rover itself. So we're going to need something for the rocket. It was about this time that I realized that we're actually short on a few pieces of our ground science, so we're going to go ahead and just add those here to bring to our scientists when we arrive. And the best thing I can actually do for my test flights now is to time warp our way into a situation that we actually have a much better transfer window, to Duna, because this entire time I've been testing this rocket with a very inefficient transfer window, so that's why everything needed to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But once I get myself into that transfer window, we can actually get rid of that inner stage entirely. The interplanetary stage is completely useless. We were able to get there on our launch vehicle all on its own. And rather than redesigning the launch vehicle to, be less and utilize all 3 stages the best way possible, I decided, you know what? This worked. I mean, in the test flight, this craft right here made it to Duna and down to the surface, so why fight it? So we're going to send this funky looking rocket and 4 Kerbals. And the goal here is to send, well, you know what? We'll talk about that during the launch. We'll talk about the goal, because that's close enough. But here we are, finalizing the rocket, making sure our staging is correct. Do one last inspection. We're going to rotate the lights a little bit. And yeah, it is ready to go. So let's go ahead and load in our Kerbals. We're going to have Airfield as the pilot, Urgard as one of the scientists, Henbrett as the engineer, and Bob as a secondary engineer. Excuse me, Bill. And we want to make one last adjustment before we go, and that is to give ourselves a little bit more battery here, and to actually give it some solar panels here, because we got rid of the interplanetary stage. We got rid of our solar panels. So we're going to need to reattach that. I go for these huge, just the biggest ones we have, which... I mean, it's good because it's overkill, it's definitely going to give us all the electricity we need, but I didn't like how it looked in the final launch and everything, and I think if we were going to make this vehicle again, we would give it more reasonable solar panels. But anyways, it is time to pursue Duna once again. So let's go ahead and launch. We're going to keep the launch into Kerbin Sphere of Influence kind of low. We're going to keep the transfer to Duna kind of short. And we're just going to focus on getting there. Or focus less on getting there and focus more on being there. So like I mentioned, the goal for today's mission is to take this rover and land it. Just as a refresher, we landed 2 Kerbals in each lander, and we landed 2 landers on either side of Duna. One of those landers is in a nice flat area. It's pretty neat and even. It's a good landing zone. And the other one is on the flattest part of a hill, of a very tall hill. And so the goal is to send this rover to those Kerbals on the tall hill, pick them up, and then using the Bon Voyage mod, we are going to self-pilot that rover to the other side of the planet, the complete opposite side of the planet, and meet up with the 2 Kerbals there. And then this will bring scientists to the whole ground base. Basically, we're gonna consolidate our Kerbals onto one ground base, make everyone be in the same location, and producing as much science as possible. The rover's also going to, stop at various biomes along the way and collect science, and then that way we'll be able to have everything all in one location. So here we are making our transfer out. It's not a perfect transfer window, but close enough that it will suffice. So we're just gonna kind of eyeball in our closest approach and then fine tune it once we've executed the maneuver. I'll go ahead and get into future goals as well, just to kind of touch in, because I'm already starting to put the plans in motion to work on this. But the goal to continue on the series, to continue on our Duna plans, is to create a mothership that will be able to send a rescue craft down to Duna's surface, collect all the Kerbals, collect all the science that's been made, and then rendezvous back with the mothership to take all those Kerbals home. At the same time, we're also going to send more Kerbals to Duna, because we're going to want a couple of them to land on Ike and collect some lunar science from that. And so ultimately, we're going to kind of do one last big push at Duna, get a whole bunch of science from it, collect our Kerbals, plant our flags, and achieve our missions, bring them on home, and then start turning our eyes towards a different planet. Once again, this is KXP, Kerbal Exploration Program, so we want to place one of our flags on every single celestial body. And it's been fun here with Duna, but once we get our ground science down, once we've traveled to a couple different biomes, once we've visited Ike, I feel that we can safely call our program here and move on to some other things. Keep getting an Ike encounter here, which wouldn't be terrible, but it would also send our trajectory pretty wild once we left. So we're going to avoid that Ike encounter for now and just kind of come in here. We're coming in pretty high, but it shouldn't be a problem to drop ourselves down to the appropriate altitude that we want. Here I am limiting the throttle of all of the engines because they're mainsails after all. They're not entirely meant to be in a vacuum. Like these are launch vehicle engines. I mean, they're great thrust and everything, but when I need tiny minuscule movements, we're gonna need to limit that throttle. So now we are getting ready to go interplanetary. So we're going to just take a moment to go into IVA and just kind of appreciate all the different aspects to the ERS rover. we are definitely going to be using this rover in KXP POV. I'm very excited about that. We're also going to be pursuing Duna and even an extraplanetary travel in POV very soon. I'm very excited about it. We're going to utilize TAC life support. We're going to have to utilize maybe cryogenics mod to keep our Kerbals from wasting their supplies on the long trip, but I'm very excited. I hope you are as well. But anyways, back to KXP. We are once again in the third person perspective, getting ready to leave Kerbin, say goodbye to everything that they knew, and hello to the Red Planet. Yeah, I didn't like how those solar panels kind of covered and clipped into each other. So on the next iteration of this rocket, we'll have better panels. I think I'll avoid these panels until we have them on a craft that I can guarantee that they won't clip, because I don't like clipping. And we see Duna in the background. It's gonna be nice to see it come up at us as we approach. Time warping our way there. We have a micro maneuver to handle before we arrive. And before we know it, the maneuver is done. We can go ahead and reset our throttle limiter back to 100% throttle, because we're not going to want it limited when we come in to orbit. So now our periapsis is at 405 meters, which is, or kilometers, which is great. We have an 803 meters per second maneuver with 2,000 remaining in our tank. So I'm very confident that this will be good. And we have Kerbals aboard, so there's no possibility of us missing our maneuver, because we've got Kerbals aboard, we've got remote tech handling it, we've got full signal, everything is good. All systems are go. I take a peek real fast at the rover brain, which should have told me something was amiss, because it's not the rover brain we need. But again, I'll get into that in a second. Let's just get ourselves to Duna. It's that little red dot on the left. And let's time warp our way there. And we're time warping pretty fast, so it's going to be upon us very shortly. Pass through the sphere of influence, and then we just rush right on to the periapsis, passing right between Ike and Duna. And a nice view of both. Coming up to our periapsis, and we're gonna just let remote tech handle the burn. I'm gonna cancel the alert, time warp our way forward. And then the time stops and engines fire. And because we have such a huge thrust to weight ratio in a vacuum. Oh, hey, there's Kerbin. Since we have such a huge thrust to weight ratio in a vacuum, it's going to take us no effort at all to circularize. We have to do this kind of funky maneuver in order to land precisely where we want to land, and because of the fact that Duna has an atmosphere, it is going to be a little bit trickier than, say, a landing on Minmus to pick exactly where you want to do. So I'm glad that we have a rover, because if we overshoot or undershoot or go too far one way or the other, we can just drive there. So pretty happy with that. But anyways, we are now coming to the atmosphere, getting ready to separate from our launch vehicle and make the final descent to the surface. Have ourselves locked retrograde, but due to the aerodynamics of the fairing, it will flip us sideways a little bit. But that's why I liked keeping the fairing on, because it keeps the heat off of us as long as we need. But we possibly wouldn't be flipping if we didn't have the fairing. So 6 of one, half dozen of another. So when we jettison them, our heat shield is now the heaviest item on us, which points us retrograde. Now that we are past through all the heating effects, our parachutes are able to be deployed, so we went ahead and hit them. As I looked back there, we overshot our target pretty significantly. Let's go ahead and jettison that heat shield. And now we're not able to hold retrograde as easily, but we're still holding it as best we can. It never quite used to how little atmosphere there is above Duna's surface and how quickly the ground will come up on you. And when my parachutes take as long as they do to pop open, it makes me very nervous. And the fact that we can leave our decoupler behind and it's still close enough to explode means that we're very close to the surface. That was a pretty close call. Swinging into IVA mode, not at a great angle to see our landing perfectly, and we for some reason our back cameras weren't selecting, but nonetheless. Get to look at everyone's screen for a second, and then come back down into the third-person perspective, just in time to see our final approach. We don't have collision turned on. It just wasn't feasible for the time being, but in our POV series we'll probably have it turned on. But for now, this beautiful rocky landscape is as it should be. So great to see this thing. I mean, I've seen it on Duna in tests before, but to know that this is the real deal, so good. So now, before it can go rendezvous with the Kerbals on the surface, we're going to do some science. As I see, it was pretty easy to see one of the breaking ground surface features, which is this pile of sand that we're heading for. There I activated those tiny little decouplers, and as you see here, we no longer have the parachutes attached, which was exactly what we wanted. So now we're gonna bring ourselves close. We're gonna open our bay doors, accidentally activate our ladder. Let's get ourselves back into position once more, and do all of our science. I'm gonna retract the ladder first. Get rid of that screen, we don't need it. And just, yeah, do all of the left side science. Get everything we can get. Apparently no seismic data can be grabbed, but everything else. So yeah, that'll be good. We are just going to keep the experiments. We'll see in a moment that we don't have connection with the KSE. Either we don't have communication dishes strong enough to reach it, or the satellite that is in orbit right now isn't in position to reach this rover, or can't even reach Kerbin. Whatever the reason may be, we're not going to be able to transmit any of this science, so we're going to have to collect it, which is why I have plans to actually make a crewed landing and ascent from Duna. We need this science. We need this science so bad. So we're going to get quite a bit from this surface feature, but however, this is the medium arm, so there's still more science to be grabbed from it. And there's, I believe, one other surface feature that can be scanned on Duna, and I believe there are 2 collectible things, so many miles to go before these Kerbals sleep on the science. So as you see here, I'm trying to transmit the data to all 480, but cannot do that, so we will have to revisit that at another time. So now it's time to meet up with the crewed lander, but before we go, we're going to actually we're going to switch over to those Kerbals, do a few things, come back to the rover, turn on the Bon Voyage mod so that way we can just let this rover pilot itself to the Kerbals, because it's quite a long distance, and as we learned from the Around the World Challenge, the longer you are piloting the vehicle in real time, the more chances you have to destroy it. So we're going to go ahead and get Lizbret out, but we realize this does have Duna gravity. It's not as easy to jump on top of the lander as it is on the Mun, so we're going to go ahead and lower the landing legs and just give her the best chance. But for now, all we're going to do is unload the Breaking Ground DLC parts and get that all set up. I did unfortunately forget to unpack certain things, so we're going to have to adjust our control. We can't hold everything, and I do manage to get this part placed down, but as you see in my mouse, I have the other part here, but for some reason when I go to put it back into my inventory, it just disappears entirely. You can see the little icon there, and now it's gone. So we lost a solar panel somehow, which is very unfortunate. However, we did manage to have more than one solar panel packed with us, so it is unfortunate, but not the end of the mission. So let's go ahead and grab our ground slam seismographer. What's it called? Anyways, this will get scientific data from any time we drop any kind of mass on the surface. It will test the seismography of it. This communication dish will hopefully transmit that data back home to Kerbin, and then here are our extra solar panels. And we only have an engineer. We don't have scientists. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to send the rover, is to bring scientists so they can create more science, set up the experiments correctly, and get everything that they can. But we only have an engineer on each of the landers, so we're going to just have to do the best with what we have. In case you're not familiar, certain experiments or certain machines will give you a bonus based on whether or not it's an engineer who places it or a scientist. And so currently we're just going to have to deal with an engineer placing everything. I'm going to go ahead and repack these parachutes. I was thinking about taking my craft a little bit lower and getting to the bottom of the hill, which may make things easier. Now look at this, completely empty. I swear I had packed that with stuff, but before we left it had emptied out, which is unfortunate because that was some good stuff that we had. Real fast before I get Lisbeth back into the Mach 1 lander can, we're going to set a waypoint using the waypoint manager, and this interacts with Bon Voyage really well, and so by setting a waypoint we'll be able to have our rover autopilot itself here, but I don't want to set the waypoint to be the exact same waypoint as the lander, because I found in my experience when you do that, the autopiloted craft becomes a missile, and when you switch to it, everyone is unhappy. So we're gonna go place our waypoint over there a little bit, get Lisbeth back into the cockpit, and we'll switch over to the ERS, set it on his autopilot journey, and then probably wrap up the episode from there. Let's get our stuff back in our inventory. And hop aboard. Excellent. So now it's time, let's go back to our rover. And there they are. We're gonna open our communication dishes. I don't think they're necessary to activate the Bon Voyage mod, but there we are. So here we are with the Rover Brain Radial mod open, and that's when I start to realize, wait a minute, Rover Brain's not Bon Voyage. Where is my ERS Rover? And that is because we put on the Rover Brain, not the Bon Voyage. That is why it's called that. I just didn't pay attention to the parts. I'm just like, oh, this makes sense. This is, rover thing. And this is from a different mod, which will allow us to collect some additional science as we go around, which is cool. It's nice. It's fun that we have that, but this will not autopilot us the several kilometers that we need to cross the distance to go pick up those Kerbals. So unfortunately, in the next episode, we are going to be sending another one of these rovers, but with the correct brain. And I hope you're excited for that. But I'm going to leave today's episode here. I think we did quite a bit, and we are just going to jump right back into it in the next one. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider subscribing. Drop me a like. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.